What's up, guys? Modern Craftsman Monday?
Monday. I mean, it's not Monday today, but we should be used to that
It's
by now.
Monday. Today we got a guest on who I know personally. I work closely with him. Maybe you've seen him on our YouTube channel when we did the structural engineer walk on our Needham build. But Rens Hayes is a partner and co-owner of H+O Structural Engineers or Engineering. And we are going to talk. I mean, we're actually going to start the conversation off with a segue from our last conversation about health, interestingly, because we always banter in the beginning. But what I like about Rens is that, yes, he's a trained engineer. He's got a successful engineering firm, but he's very business savvy. And he spends a lot of his time, researching and learning about business. I think he said I want to say for the last
I think it said since 2014 or
yeah,
something. Maybe so. Yeah, 2014.
2014, he's been, listening to audiobooks or podcasts, dedicated at least an hour a day to just, improving himself in his business.
Yeah, that's a big investment of time. I don't know of anything that I've done for an hour a day since 2014. But I enjoyed the conversation. Obviously a very knowledgeable person. It's interesting to see somebody who took a background and experience within the steel industry, even from his father's business, and then found a passion for growing and scaling a business. And obviously, his business is still within structural engineering, but you can see that he has taken on a different set of tasks, daily responsibilities, and finds a lot of gratification in growing his business. So that was interesting to talk to him. He also has a podcast that he just started, so we'll put all that information in the show notes as well. So definitely give that a listen if you have a chance.
And one of my favorite stories he tells early on in the podcast is about his father and how his father started the steel business, and a real good talk about value and bringing value and charging appropriate cost for the value in which you are bringing, the end user. So
Yeah, not necessarily charging an hourly rate, but more so what that rate should be based on what value you're providing.
this podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. Quality and performance are at the core of every Andersen product.
Andersen's A series is the best performing, most energy efficient windows and doors we have ever offered. With a wood interior and fiberglass and composite exterior, A series is built to withstand the elements and keep water out, all without peeling, blistering, fading, or corroding.
Out of the box, A-Series windows are PG-50, but for those looking for more, there is a PG-70 upgrade available. And for homes on the coast who require impact protection, A-Series is available with our Stormwatch protection.
That's impressive because I've only ever heard of PG-13 before.
Mm,
So it's going up to 70 now.
yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Gonna be old to watch them. With best-in-class glass options, including heat lock technology and triple pane glass, also available with the E-Series, A-Series windows are our most energy efficient. Select A-Series windows are even certified to meet the rigorous level of energy efficiency required by FIAS, Passive House Institute US, and recognized as most efficient of Energy Star in 2022. See the difference by visiting andersenwindows.com. You gotta be 70 or 50.
And that's Andersen, Andersen, Windows.com. This podcast is brought to you by Buildertrend. Money, it's difficult to talk about, but we're going to break that taboo right now.
As a home builder, having a system to manage your finances accurately and precisely can't be undervalued because money is the lifeline of your business. For too many builders, that system looks like tracking every penny across faulty spreadsheets or operating in the dark and keeping fingers crossed that a profit is turned.
But the best builders are discovering a better way with Buildertrend. With the leading construction platform, they're able to stay on top of their bottom line by delivering accurate estimates with less hassle and faster turnaround times, managing cash flow and budgets in real time, and sending and tracking every invoice and change order.
I'll be honest, and that this isn't on the script, but when you learn to track your numbers, and when you're confident in your numbers, the stress of business goes way down.
Mhm.
So a system like this and understanding that there's going to be a profit during and after the job is going to make you a much better, less stressed out business owner. Don't let mistakes and misunderstanding hurt your profits. Sleep better at night knowing you have full financial control with Buildertrend. Learn more at buildertrend.com/mcfinancials. You're up near Boston?
That's right. Well, I'm just west of Boston, so I'm in Hopkinton, Mass, but our business is downtown, right in the financial district of Boston.
Nice. Are you from up that way?
South of the city, yeah. So kind of near Foxborough Stadium, Patriots Place.
Like you grew up in that area?
Yep.
That's cool.
I kind of had I don't know. Sometimes I look back on college and like, why didn't I go to like someplace warm where it was more like a resort atmosphere? But I
Yeah.
chose to go to Worcester because I was already like career driven. I was like, I'm going to design building. I'll be in design and construction my whole life. So I might as well go to school around here and try to build relationships. And
Mhm. Did
I
you
ended up in
did you
Worcester.
party in school?
Yeah, for sure.
There
I,
goes my internet. Apologies.
I can hear you fine.
yeah, for sure. Honestly, I don't know how we lived that lifestyle back in college.
But
Like
were
the
you
college lifestyle is mind blowing to me.
like you were a big partier?
Uh, what's big? I frequently, weekly, for sure. Yeah, I was in like it was a great group of guys. We were in a fraternity ATO
Yeah.
at WPI. WPI is like very much fraternity based
Mhm.
and then sorority based. There's actually more women in every single class, like even since before me.
Huh.
Like the ratio is getting closer and closer to 50-50. But
Yeah.
so I was in like the baseball team and soccer team fraternity, and yeah, you hang out.
What about after college? And I'm asking this because I had a recent conversation about this. Like
Uh, not
after
really, not much.
yeah.
No, like very infrequent, and like that part of my life went away very quickly.
Yeah. Cuz in college, I mean, yeah, I think I I party but not nearly as much as my friends. My schedule, if I had class on Monday at you know, in the afternoon, I was working Monday morning up until class. And then Friday, if I had class, I would get out of class and drive home and work the weekend. I stayed one
Yep.
weekend my entire college career ever. And it was like
Uh,
it was the running joke, which I look back and I'm like, I don't feel as though I missed anything. And
yeah,
do I think I'm in a better spot than I would have been? No, I think it's completely indifferent.
you might have had more money in your pocket for those few years. That
Oh
was a
yeah.
difference maker at the time, right?
Yeah, I
I,
mean,
I didn't work during school.
yeah. See,
So
I
during
couldn't.
school, I went to school, and soccer, like for half the year, was a pretty big lift.
Yeah.
You'd be training every day, but
Yeah, I didn't do any sports. I basically gave up sports right before high school. I loved baseball, and then I was a catcher forever. And it was my last year I played, not intentionally, but it was the coach swapped me out, threw his son in the catcher spot, put me in. He put me in like left field or something like that, and which is fine. But I was like, this, I want to be a catcher, and I never went back. I was so
never went back.
yeah, I was like so
Just
aggravated,
resented all athletics
resented it.
at that point. Screw
Sports, I'm
this.
done.
Sports
I can't
suck.
be catcher.
I'm
I'm out.
done.
But it wasn't where my mind was at. I at that age, like I got my license. I was into cars. I was working on cars, and I had a side business doing carpentry, and so then it just became work and making money. And I was like, nah, I don't have time for sports.
So why did you ask him if he drank a lot in college?
I asked if he partied a lot because the other day this came up and someone was talking about just partying in general, and I think we were on the conversation about like a lot of, I think we talked about this last podcast, but a lot of people are giving up alcohol. Like it's just like there's like this huge wave
Huge wave.
of
Yeah.
people just like, hey, I'm just not gonna stop drinking. And actually, you know what it was is our mutual friend Rens Connor.
Hmm.
So I got lunch with him the other day, and he was saying he was doing the 75 hard challenge, and I was like, oh yeah, I know like 6 people doing it right now. And he's like, there's times like I want a beer, but there's other times like I'm glad I don't have a beer. And
Hmm.
I didn't quit drinking, but I just haven't drank. and it's not something that I'm like I'm alcohol free, but I'm realizing that there's this huge wave of people that they're just like, yeah, I stopped drinking. And I was talking to someone about like partying. I was like, yeah, there was a time in college where I would drink and go out and party, but I never got into it to the point where it was going to be like my lifestyle. I always felt like I had to wake up the next day and do something. And now with kids, like,
Mhm.
forget it. Like, I've definitely drank too much and woken up with a hangover and had my kids, like I was like, nope, not like this is not worth it. And not even because I was tired and uncomfortable, but I also didn't want to be the dad that was like, no, guys, I need more time to sleep. Like, I'm gonna take time away from you
I'm
because I
still
drank too much.
drunk.
Yeah.
Mhm. That 75 hard challenge is no joke.
What is
What
it?
it's
So
like two 45-minute workouts a
yeah,
day.
one inside, one outside, a gallon of
Yeah.
water, 10 pages you gotta read, no
Yeah. No,
alcohol, strict
and take a
diet.
picture of yourself every
Yeah,
day.
yeah. So it's Andy Frisella, who is like CEO, and I forget what his podcast is called, but um, he's First Form Nutrition. So he wrote a book on it and then created this challenge, and it's to the point where people are like doing the challenge, not even knowing who Andy is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I've
it's just
never
like
heard of it.
75.
I
It's
don't really know
75
who
days.
Andy is. I know what the challenge is.
Yeah, it's fun, and that's funny to me because
It
I've followed Andy for years now. I mean, he's
it
just
is a pretty hardcore challenge, like,
Definitely
and
not sustainable.
that's what I was gonna the thing I've learned more about is,
what
like, the
part isn't
importance of building
sustainable?
habits.
Right.
The fact that it's 75 days, like, some of it's gonna be more sticky than your 30-day challenge. Like, 75, you're getting out there and
Yeah.
in number of reps. But it's like the person that doesn't work out, like, that's really probably a little bit of a push for them to do
Mhm.
2 45-minute workouts a day. Like, the goal is for them to do something every day.
Right.
Like, my fitness has totally changed. About after I blew my back out basically in 2018 with a big disc herniation in my lumbar spine. And since then, like, I essentially had to do like 15 minutes of like body movement, like functional movement and stretching and
Mhm.
like body weight strengthening every day just to function. And
Mhm.
that became like the premise of my workouts. Now, I practically work out every day, but most of my workouts are less than 20 minutes.
Mm.
And I'm now like healthier and more fit than I have been in years.
And it's
Because
more of from a functional standpoint.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like always working towards like fixing like my shoulder mobility or posture,
Mhm.
hips, low back, that type of thing. Like identifying like where's the weakness and the lack of movement I have in my body, and I'm trying to work on that. And I use like bands, pull-ups, like yoga type stuff or
Mhm.
kettlebells to do it.
I got to get
Yeah.
into that. Get some better mobility and better posture as I'm like sitting here hunched over.
The movie mine came out of a necessity, right? So someone even said that it's like you get if you get injured early in life, you live a long life. You get injured late in life, you live a short life.
Oh,
So it's
True.
like
interesting. Yeah.
that forced me in like my personal daily habits and like upkeep of my health are significantly better. It led me to dropping gluten and dairy. We're
Mm.
talking about alcohol, which is also inflammatory,
Mhm.
but gluten and dairy were major inflammatory foods that were in every single meal I like ever ate.
Mhm.
Like not like just completely oblivious to how it impacted my body. And I got rid of it to try to help the inflammation in my disc. And I literally am now down 20 pounds, like better gut health, better like skin health. And
Mhm.
it was like my entire life. I'm 20 pounds lighter than I've been since high school.
What
Yeah.
other side effects did you feel getting rid of the inflammatory foods helped with?
I mean, those two, the skin one was a big one. Like I always felt like I hated my skin and like I was always trying to do moisturizer or something to improve it. And it turned out to just be diet. Like that was like so like I was just fixing a symptom instead of the cause, and the cause was the diet.
Yeah.
So those
It's
two were big.
it's like that's what we talked about our last podcast is nutrition. And Tyler, I don't know if you saw what the team's reaction, but apparently it was one of our most engaging conversations we've had on the podcast.
Oh, really?
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, like they were like the amount of DMs coming in about this episode is staggering.
I had no
Um,
idea.
I know, and I started getting tagged in people's like breakfast and what they do, like what they eat, and it was interesting. But Rens, like to go back to your point, the fact that you did it out of necessity that and kind of changed the course is interesting because I think a lot of people get into fitness for wrong reasons too, where it's
Mhm.
like, they do it to get big or they want to be, competing, whatever it is. It's like, but you're not competing. You're trying to compete for what?
Mhm.
You're going to hurt yourself. And I too switched to more of what they call functional bodybuilding, essentially is what the program is called, but it's all designed to be more functional movements, not these like, overexertions.
Fitness is a marathon. That was like one thing I learned.
Mm.
I am that person. I also enjoyed lifting heavy. I was naturally strong. So I
Mm.
always had these marks. I never called them like personal records.
Mm-hmm.
I had just set these bars of like benchmarks I think I should have already been at.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I was working towards. Like I should be able to clean 300 pounds. I should be able to bench 315 or whatever the number is. And I would just be like driven to those, but I
Mm.
didn't have like the full fitness regiment. I would just be like hyper focused on that. And that's ultimately what led to me blowing out my back, is because I was ignoring all of these other things and focused on the things that I enjoyed and like that gave me personal fulfillment in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like way too tight of a window. Like, why do I need to clean 300 pounds in the next few months when I'm going to live for another 70 years?
Right.
like think maybe a little longer term when you're coming up with your strategy.
It's funny. That's exactly how I blew my back out a few months ago. And it was
I
just
thought
like,
you hit your head on something.
that was the start of it. I tweaked my back, and then I did a too heavy of a leg press, which like 17 people reached out and was like, "Hey, leg presses are really bad for your back. You shouldn't." I'm like, "Got it." I haven't been on a leg press machine since. But
Mm-hmm.
everything I was doing, I was tracking my weight. So every time I would hop back into a machine or a bar, I'd look at what I did for weight last time, and then I would add to it. Now, I don't like. There's nowhere like the app I'm using. There's nowhere to add weight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, hey, do whatever, like 4 back squats, and I'm like, what did I do for weight last time? And like I'm trying to look at my notes, and I'm like, there is no notes. So I just throw like what I think it is, and I do 4 of them. Like, oh, I actually get up that weight, and I do it based on my feel rather than this like fictitious number that I'm trying to increase. Where it's like, well, now I'm like forced to listen to my body as to what I can be doing rather than this milestone that we're creating for ourselves.
Yeah, I think the inflammatory foods thing is interesting too. I've always had lung problems my whole life, and when I eat very clean, I can breathe so much better, and you don't realize like how many uh how much food have inflammatory either additives or hormones put into food that affect the way that I actually breathe. And the only time I can breathe really well in life is when I'm like 100% clean eating.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Uh,
amazing. Yeah,
it's just
the big inflammatory foods right there. It's gluten, it's dairy, it's sugar, and then alcohol. Those are like the 4 main ones I'm trying to look out for. And to like the conversation of like people going away from alcohol, it's like I notice if I have like even just a few drinks a couple days in a row, right? You try to keep it to social. Like if you go out
Mm-hmm.
with a client, you go out with friends, you go out to dinner, and then
Mm-hmm.
before you know it, that's like 4 or 5 nights a week, and you're like, is that really what I want to be doing 4 or 5 nights a week? Not
Yeah.
really. Even a drink, because it just maintains this higher level of inflammation because you're not letting your body get rid of it.
Yeah.
So if you're too consistent with even a drink a day, it's like I notice in my body and even weight, like how I feel and weight, like just seeing that impact, it's not good.
Yeah, it was probably a couple months ago. I went out and sat down. I was like, yeah, I'll grab a beer. Like we walked down to the restaurant, drank a beer, and it was like, nothing. It was just a drink. And I went
Mhm.
home, whatever the rest of the night. I woke up the next morning. I'm like, you got to be shitting me. I'm like, what? How do I feel? One beer, and like I went out for a run that morning. I'm like, I'm trash. And like that's where it really what started this, like where it stemmed from. And forever I was a big tequila drinker, and tequila didn't really impact me. But what I realized is that it didn't impact me the way that every other alcohol did. But the
Mhm.
reality is it was still maintaining this like high. Tyler, you're smirking your ass
I'm
off
just
over
there's like I'm thinking of a song with tequila in it. It's like just making me laugh right now. It doesn't. Tequila doesn't impact me the way the other alcohol does.
Yeah, I just end up naked.
Oh, that's funny.
But it's I don't know. It's interesting to see the dynamic, and you see Brooklyn, New York, and they're opening all these mocktail bars. You see all these mocktail cocktails coming out. Liquid Death becoming this billion-dollar company about canning water.
Unbelievable.
So it's more socially acceptable to drink water with your friends that are drinking beers. It's like the next, there's these articles saying that the next 15 years, alcohol will be essentially like not non-existent, but it will be like cigarettes, where it's like very few people are even partaking in it. And I think
That'd
there's
be
a lot.
the best thing that happens to our youth in a long time,
I,
in my opinion.
I don't disagree, and and I don't know if my opinions certainly changed on that. Where like a year ago, I probably been like, oh no, I don't think it's that bad. And it's not that I'm like, I'll probably have a glass of wine in the next week or so, but it's not, it's just different. I mean, Hermosi, right? Rens and I are Alex Hermosi fans, but he was talking recently about his drinking, and he gave it up for a long time because he realized that what he was doing is what we all do, is that we get home from a long stressful day of work, and we do our, we get through our routine, and we're like, oh, I just need a drink to chill out. And it doesn't seem like an issue until all of a sudden now you can't chill out unless you have a drink.
Yeah.
And that's where I was at, where it's like a long day, working, put the kids to bed. I just want to drink and sit and chill for
I just
an
want
hour.
some tequila and I want to dance.
Yeah. And then realistically, it's having the adverse effect, right? It might allow us to chill in the short term, but if you're trying to like reduce anxiety or get like, it just makes it harder the next day.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the premise, right?
Yeah. I didn't think we'd talk about alcohol.
I didn't either. But the mocktail industry, I think I read that it's like a $370 billion industry.
So
I'm so far out of the loop with this because the first time I heard about that was last podcast, Nick.
Dude, I think I said it last podcast. Yeah, and all these, it's like you can get alcohol-free tequila, but then you look at the ingredients and it's shit. It's like, well, you're replacing tequila, which from a health perspective is relatively healthy. Like there's not a lot of shit in it unless you get a bad tequila. But the stuff that tastes like tequila but doesn't have alcohol is like chemicals that make it taste like alcohol but doesn't have, like, I'm like, no, that's not the right way to go about it. But the mocktail places are just having some sort of
You're good.
Happened?
I don't know.
I know, but it just said trying to upload. Whatever. I gotta shut this off.
Not on our end.
Doug is not answering me, so I'm like, I don't want to shut it off and then screw something up.
To the point on tequila, I feel the same way with sometimes it's like the let's say the vegetarian type food or the dairy-free cheese. Like I'm getting away from dairy. I don't need to replace cheese with some fake cheese. Like I'm just trying to move to a new thing. Like don't try to call it a Beyond Burger. Like why is it a burger? Just call it something.
Right.
Call it what it is. Right.
Right. Which is like worse for you. It's like,
and there's marketing to that. I'm sure they've done the math and tested it to know that they get more sales, but still.
Right. So, Rens, we'll go back to what we thought we'd talk about. You grew up south of Boston. Your father owns a miscellaneous steel company.
Yep, structural steel and Miss Metal.
So, talk to me or talk to us about that, because it was, well, tell the story about your dad and the front end loader buckets.
The front end loader. So this is a story of how my dad ended up starting. The company's named Rens Welding and Fabricating. And my dad is truly a one of a kind talent when it comes to building anything with steel. Like he is extremely strategic, smart in how he approaches it, and fast at what he does. And back, he got started in the 80s. And at the time, manufacturing isn't what it is today. So everybody, like all the entire site industry, if you had an excavator bucket, you wear out the wear strips and you damage your bucket. And so it was cheaper to repair your bucket back in the day. So you would replace the curved plate on the bottom of your bucket and the wear strips. And my dad was able to do an excavator bucket in 9 hours. And now to this day, I worked in the shop my entire childhood and came back to it to help him run it as an adult. I had never seen somebody do a bucket in less than 2.5 days, and he used to do them in 9 hours. And so back in the 80s, I think he was charging $3,000 for a bucket repair. And so people were paying him. But at the time, he didn't have a shop. And we just had our house in Norton, Mass. And he drove a crane truck as his daily driver. He didn't have a car. He bought a crane. And so he would drive, he would buy the plate curved from the steel supplier, pick up the steel, and he would go and he would repair an excavator bucket on your job site. And he would just show up in the morning with a bent plate and a crane, and he would hoist that thing up off the bumper, and he would replace your entire, like he would air arc out the plate, remove the wear strips, add it, and weld the whole thing up complete in 9 hours and walk away. And back in the 80s, people were like, they started getting pissed at him. They're like, this isn't worth $3,000. Like, you just did it in a day. I'm not paying you that. And he's like, don't hate me because I'm fast. It takes everybody else 3 days. Like, it's $3,000 worth of work in the plate. And so he ended up buying a building because so many people complained about how fast he did. And on Mondays, he would go pick up 6 buckets, bring them to his building, and he would do 6 buckets and then deliver them all back to the job site on Saturday, so that he got away with that. But that's why he bought his first building. It's a pretty cool story.
18 grand a week. It's not bad.
Right? And I love the, it reminds me of like all those motivational posters or stuff around the trades where it's like, you don't pay me for my time, you pay me for my experience. But I never asked this before. How come it took everyone else 2.5 hours? Like,
Days.
what was? I mean, yeah, days. What was the contributing factor to? Was it because he was buying the stuff pre-bent and everyone else is sitting there with a torch?
They're pre-bending it. It never fits up that fast, right? If I had to put it into words, there's one thing is like when you're driven and you know what your goal is you get like increased rewards for doing it fast. So like his downtime was probably negligible. He didn't have downtime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he might go to the bathroom or grab something quick to eat, but eat in like 5 minutes and back to work. But he knew every single step. He wasn't figuring something out as he went. So he knew what to anticipate. He knew how to plan. He knew how to prepare. He knew he'd run into. And then there's the technical skill of getting something like that to fit up and knowing what is and isn't important, because you're bending a piece of steel at a steel supplier to fit a bucket that's on a job site. Like, that's not going to be perfect. So what's your strategy to get that to fit if you do need to continue to bend it? And like, he's like a master of leverage, right? So you'd have other pipes and metals and you'd create kind of levers. You'd weld a pipe to a plate to be able to create some leverage to suck a plate in and then weld it. And then when it came to the skill set of welding, he's like as fast as it gets. So those are really big welds. So he had the right machine on his truck. If you just tried to buy a small, like this, he still has it. It's called like the Sam 400 or the Sam 4000. He would know better than I am. The thing's like the size of a small car. It's like the size of a Prius. And he used to just have that in the back of the crane. And the thing runs wire and runs super hot. So he could lay down a massive bead. So these welds, when you're welding in, you'd think an excavator bucket, I forget how thick the plate are. They might be 3/4. And so you have a lot of passes it's a full pen weld when you're getting it. It's a fully completed weld. So there's a lot of volume of weld. He would do it in like half the passes of your normal welder. And I don't think he ever picked his lid up. He used to, like, now they have the auto darkening lids.
Yeah.
But before those came out, I would watch him weld, and he would literally jump welds with the dark shield. So he was using the flash from this weld to spot his next weld, and he would jump without picking his helmet up. He's like literally, he's incredible when he's working.
That's amazing.
Do you know whose dad does something similar, Nick? John Marley's.
Really?
Yeah, so his dad fixes cranes.
I did know that. And he travels the country for it.
Yeah, I mean, he travels all over. They send him wherever, essentially, because if you have a crane on a job, nobody can do anything if the crane's out. So they pay him essentially whatever rate he wants, and he'll pack up and ship his tools and go and do site crane repairs, because like what's your other option? To break the crane down and send it out. So essentially
Mhm.
he's like, my dad can charge whatever he wants and travel the world repairing cranes on site, which is a pretty sweet business.
Awesome business.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the cranes that, when I was in commercial, it's like those things ran constantly. It ran, I mean,
Oh yeah.
those things, and they're not cheap.
No.
You're paying hundreds of dollars an hour just for the guy in the cab.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you can't, if your crane's not operable on a site, nobody's working.
No.
Like, there's
So
nothing to do.
this is a perfect lesson for the typical guy in trades or small business owner is charge for the value of the service, not
Mhm.
necessarily how, if you think of just your cost, you already set like some arbitrary value of your time and you say like, all right, I'm going to get there. It can take me 3 hours. It's only half day. I can get that done for 500 or $1,000, right? Like maybe I'm making good money in those 4 hours, but your service is actually more like a concierge emergency call service
Yeah.
to a crane that is being charged, that the value of that crane is thousands of dollars per day.
Hmm.
So it's like be aware of what value you're creating for your customer and the type of service. It's not like you're planning this thing out a month. They're calling you probably the day before and say, "Hey, are you available tonight? Are you available tomorrow?"
Hmm.
Make sure you're charging for the value you're creating.
That's a great point. I think that I had a call with a kid yesterday, and we were talking about um, charging appropriately, and how to compete when guys are undercutting him by $100 a square foot. Like, and this is something that comes up a lot, and you
Mhm.
hear everyone's like, you got to provide value, you got to provide value and sell value, like, and it's all real, but people don't understand what that means. And in the conversation, I think that this industry as a whole, people get caught up in the fact that we're a service provider, which
Mhm.
in a lot of ways we are. Like, we are service providers, but and you can charge as a service provider, and that's where you're going to get a base rate per hour. You want to stick out, and you want to be a guy that can charge more money and sell. You need to provide more value. And what does that value mean? You have to figure that out. And oftentimes for us, like, for what I have gathered from everyone I've ever surveyed in that's worked with us or has considered working with us, is that communication is huge. and
Mhm.
and and the clientele that we're going after are people that value communication. Where, yeah, there's guys that, and let me give you a real world example. So our project management on a project is expensive. We
Mhm.
have full-time supervision, we have full-time project management. Those are separate in our world. We have, there's a lot of costs in general conditions, but we're designed to be white glove with our project management and our communication. We are
Mhm.
communicating with the client on a daily basis. We are on a weekly basis. Like, there's so much communication that it would be unreasonable for the client to not know exactly what's going on without ever stepping foot on the site. That's the way we've approached it.
Mhm.
So that's the value. Now, not every client cares. Some clients are like, hey, listen, the most important thing for me is getting it done for $2 million.
Yeah.
Like, and I'll come and I'll pick it up when it's done. And that's fine. Like, they're not looking
Mhm.
for that handheld, approach, and that's not our client. And this
Correct.
is where I think people fail to realize, it's like, well, I want to work for the more expensive clients, but I can't because I'm competing against the guys that are $100 less. That's not your client.
Yep.
You're trying to provide more value. And again, the value is exactly what you just said. In that case, it's the fact that not even thousands of dollars a day, like a commercial crane, that's tens of thousands of dollars a
Yeah.
day
The
that it's
big
worth.
cranes.
So
Mhm.
if you can't repair, like, they're and it's not. And I think a lot of people will hear that and be like, well, now you're just price gouging because you're the only guy that can fix it. It's like, no, you're the only guy that took the risk to get into a trade that is demanding enough to fly you across the country on last minute's notice, peel you away from your family. Like, you're the
Mhm.
one that took that risk.
Or I
Correct.
would just be like, go get somebody else to do it then. I don't care.
No, I know, but I think
Like,
that people, like,
Yeah.
oftentimes, will, like, attribute, even like what we do. It's like, you're just charging that, you're price gouging. Like, I can do that for half the money. It's like, understood. We might end up with a similar product, but or a similar service, but no, I would say product. But the approach and the way we're going to get there is going to be different. And if
Yeah.
a client wants that white glove, approach or experience throughout the project, that's who we're going to appeal to.
Yeah. So I come at this conversation from two different ways. I'll start with the first is the goal isn't to win every job. The goal is to win the right job.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a lot of times the people that are trying to win every job are the ones that end up literally beating themselves up and becoming the commodity price model that is honestly holding down the other people in the industry. And if there's too many of them competing, like it just continues to drive to where the commodity market no longer makes any money in a mature industry like construction. It's a huge, huge challenge, I think. The second way that it's called the value disciplines model, and it's kind of has like a triangular type thing. I'm not sure. Are you too familiar with it?
I am not.
It's a way to think about your kind of go-to-market strategy. Like, how are you positioning yourself in the market? And the three parts of the value disciplines model, one are operational excellence, product innovation, or customer intimacy. And the idea is you have to have a baseline level of competence in all three areas to compete in a given market. And you have to put it into respect. Like, say, a small commercial company is different than the level of competency a high-rise contractor needs, right? Like, they're competing in different markets. So the level of competency required in those three areas is relative to the market you're competing in. The important one in how to communicate value is you have to pick one as your go-to-market strategy. So for H+O, we're professional services. So we are a customer intimacy. That's our strategy. Mm-hmm. And whenever we're talking about operational excellence or product innovation, it's always through the lens of how does this improve our customer experience, right? The customer intimacy. And what that does is it aligns a team and you start to think and make decisions as a team on how you answer that question that improves on how you communicate to your client. And if you fail to do so, there's a little spot in the center that those that fail to clarify which strategic model they're following, they're often pushed into commodity price, and it's not by choice, right? They're pushed in there because that's where the market ends up. It's helped me tremendously bring clarity to that conversation in my company.
So I was looking up a little bit about you and what you do in your business and what your background is. And for our listeners, I think it would make sense. You own part of a structural engineering firm, but you also have put a lot of emphasis on building that business and bringing in the right people and developing those business processes. It's almost as if you have two careers.
Sure.
Where you have the actual structural engineering side of things, as well as the business development and the business development background and acumen. Can you talk a little bit to what the actual structural engineering business looks like, how you got into that? And then I think that I would like to dig into the kind of business development things.
Absolutely. So I'll give the elevator pitch on how I got to structural engineering. We talked about my father and his start. So he grew from that, like doing structural repairs and bucket repairs. And he ended up, somebody literally said, like, can you erect a steel building? And he literally went and watched a steel job site, people erecting the building. And then he came back and said, yeah. And they literally dropped a pile of steel off and he fabricated and erected a building on site. And that was the first one.
So initially when he was doing bucket repairs, was he just working by himself doing that?
Yeah, he went on his own right about at that time instead of doing bucket repairs. And then that quickly turned into him buying a building because of the bucket repair thing. Somebody knew he was talented, asking him if he wanted to try to install a building. And that's how it kicked off the building side of his business.
So then he at this point now has a building business. Is bucket repair still a thing?
There's maybe a few that come through the door. Like, that's not the core business. He does like high level structural steel fabrication, like has an amazing like fabrication process, all high end equipment. steel erecting, and then Miss Metal, stainless, high-end type Miss Metal, anything like that's a steel stair, a railing, guardrails, elevator stuff, like you name it.
So that's how you got your introduction to the structural engineering world.
Yeah, so I grew up in the steel world, and Nick and I have talked about this, but there's always this kind of conversation in high school. It's like, so what are you going to do? You're just going to go work for your dad and take over the steel company? You're just going to go take over your steel company? And the statistics show most second generation owners are they end up tanking more often than not. Like they tank the business because
Tommy boy.
Tommy boy. They're entitled. They haven't learned. They just kind of grow up in that shadow. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I was like, I'm good at math. Like that leads to engineering. I'm going to go figure out how to engineer these buildings, and then I'll engineer them, and then we can build them with the steel company. That'll be like a good way to bring value back to the family business. So that's what sent me on that path. I got exposed to high-rise design and large-scale development because once you get an engineering degree, you can't just come out of school and start designing buildings. You have to work for 4 years under an accredited licensed professional engineer, and then you have to pass another test. So you have to go work somewhere. So I was like, if I have to work for somebody, I'm going to try to work on the biggest buildings I possibly can to learn how it's done at a high level so that I could be successful on my own in the future. And that's how we ended up kind of where we are. I left that company after I got my license. I went back and helped run the steel company. And that's really where I got exposed to business operations and the importance. At that time, I was making a decision. Do I go get an MBA, or do I go back and run my dad's company with him and invest in trying to get an MBA level education on my own while helping my dad's company, helping my family, and still earning an income instead of putting my career on hold and forking up $100,000 to go to a high MBA program? It was like a no-brainer decision to me once I put it into that perspective. And that was the day I committed to listening to Audible or podcast every single day in the commute. So since 2014, I've got an hour worth of that type of learning every single day during my commute.
How long did you work for that other company for?
The engineering company, I worked there for 4 years.
And then, so you get your license at that point?
Yep, I got my license, and then that's when I left. I went back and started running the steel company with my father. And at that same time, we started just getting natural engineering opportunities through the steel company. So Jeremiah, who's my business partner at H+O, he was my old colleague at that previous firm. We started collaborating on taking on all that structural work that we would get through the company. And it wasn't we're talking maybe 20, 30, 40 grand a year kind of passively through the steel company, but it showed us the opportunity. And we also saw all of the engineering drawings in the entire market because we were bidding the jobs.
Yeah.
And the thing we identified was that it was vastly underserved, especially the mid-market. So we thought once we took the leap, we could really go for it and grab the mid-market and get back to high-rise, large-scale development in fairly short order.
What was the process like, or what is the process like for getting your actual license? Is it different from state to state?
A couple of years back, they really unified that process. So you have to get an accredited degree. Once you have that bachelor's degree, you have to take an engineering test. It's an 8-hour test. It's called the Fundamentals of Engineering. That's kind of a more broad brush. You have to pass that test. Then you have to get 4 years of experience under a licensed engineer. And then you take another test, which is your professional engineering test. And the one I took is a structural engineering test, which is a 2-day, 16-hour test. And once you pass that, that's when you get your license and you can now go on your own.
Do a lot of people end up would you say that more people end up going off on their own, or do that to kind of get a bump within the company that they're working for, that now they're a licensed engineer?
Yeah, I would say anyone that's working, let's say at a decent level within the engineering field, is gunning for that license. Whether they're going to go on their own or not, it's it's definitely a badge that you wear once you get it. So I would advise anybody that is in the structural engineering field or another engineering field, definitely push for that licensure.
So did you always know, it was always your plan essentially to get the license and then either go back to your dad's company or start your own business. It wasn't just to stay at this company, get a pay raise because now you're a licensed engineer. Like this was part of the plan.
I wanted to run my own business since I was in high school. So I
Yeah.
always knew I was going to. While I was at that firm, I did say I just personally didn't know anyone that led a successful career in corporate America. Like my circle from my hometown, Norton, Mass, like everyone I saw as successful was a small business owner. So in my mind, that was the only way I knew how. Once I got there, I was like, I'm going to give this like an honest try. And if I see career growth opportunity, like maybe I'll see this through. We'll see what's out there. And I just felt like I nailed my head on the career ceiling like the second I walked in the door, and that there was no one trying to help open up a door or seek opportunity. I couldn't see any viable path that was going to be in the timeline anywhere close to what I was ambitious or like what I was driven to do.
I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that essentially you could become competition for the people you're working under. Essentially, that you're going to go work for somebody, get your license, and potentially start up a business. As far as there not being a non-compete or something along those lines in place, like why that world is not welcoming to advancement within it.
I'll elaborate on this. This is my perspective or my observation in the market. And it's honestly the fundamental position that how we position H+O is like solving this problem in the industry so that we can create career upside for our people.
Yeah.
And you talked about like developing organizational awareness or business acumen. And I've spent majority of my time like focused in learning and growing as a business leader and understanding how do you create enterprise value? How do you scale? Like what are the speed bumps? What are the hurdles? What are the obstacles? Like where do you start? Actually, I'm going to go down that path for just a second. So one of the things after I read all these books at the steel company, I'm like, we're growing. We were able to grow 10x in 4 years. And I felt like we had all this business acumen, and I still felt like I was in the middle, kind of like a yo-yo is how I explain it. You're on a seesaw. I fix this over here, and then the thing I used to be focused on would drop. And I was like, I just felt like I was always starting from the middle. And I was like, where do you actually start to like not like go backwards every time you try to improve something? And mergers and acquisitions, which was the world that taught me enterprise value. I got a certification there, the Certified Value Growth Advisor in M&A. And it taught me that you start with mission, vision, and values, your company purpose, your company vision, where you're going, your aspirational identity in 5 years, and your core values drive organizational behavior and decision-making. And without those, you're kind of fighting a headwind the whole way. That like creates alignment and clarity in where you're going as a company and allows you to kind of bring an entire team together and know what you're trying to do.
So for people who are not as business savvy, the mergers and acquisitions essentially is a business model for hiring.
So mergers and acquisitions is like buying another business.
Okay.
So I got exposed to this market and I had never thought about business in this way. If you just look objectively at trying to buy any business, like think about if you're going to buy your local laundromat, an HVAC company, electrical company, an engineering company, how would you go about evaluating that company? What's it worth? What would you be willing to pay and why? And I got exposed to that thinking, and it was completely different than how I used to think about it, or it taught me how to look at it. So a balanced organization is how you reduce company risk. And when you can reduce company risk, you increase value, right? Because what you're trying to do with an entity is you're trying to create predictable, transferable, and sustainable value. And value is really cash flow and profit. So if you're not quite sure what your future value is it sustainable? I don't know. How much work is in the pipeline? I don't know. What are you going to make for profit next year? I don't know. That means it's risky, and somebody buying that is going to offer a lot lower number than if you have an entire marketing, a sales program, you're tracking growth, you have your future plans out there, you show like what your cash position could be in 3 different models for next year's growth. Are you going to grow 10%, 20%, 30%? What happens in a 30% market slide? Are you safe, or do you have to lay off half your team and close the doors? Like all having that perspective and thinking about it as an asset a private company is a stock. So imagine buying like a public company that wasn't confident in what they were doing or where they were going. Like you would never buy that stock. And if you think of your small business as a stock, that stock has a value, and your goal should be to increase the value of that stock every year.
So to dumb this down, and not that our listeners are dumb, but it can be difficult to follow along if you have other stuff on your listener podcast. My comparison or analogy for what you're trying to say, essentially, if you have a rental property and there's 4 units in it, the valuation of that rental property is going to be based on land value, the cost of the actual building, and then what you bring in as far as rents go. If you make some modifications to that, you get a higher paying tenant in, and there's more cash positive. That business, essentially, which is the building, is going to be valued at a higher rate because it brings in more money now.
Sure.
Essentially, that could be transferable to a business, but the valuation of the business is obviously what the building may be worth, the land may be worth, but also what the cash flow looks like within that business.
And to build on that example, if you're buying a house that's say 20 years old, or a multifamily building that's 20 years old, and the HVAC system hasn't been updated, right? Those types of things, like what are the maintenance things that haven't happened or are coming to the end of the life cycle? That's going to change how much you would buy a company. So if you're looking at a manufacturing company and they haven't updated any of their equipment in 10 years, you're going to value that a lot less. Even if they make, let's say it's a $10 million company that makes 10%, there's 2 companies. One's innovative and has stayed up to date with all of their equipment and process and software, and the other company is antiquated, but they have the same financials. One business is going to be worth more to you, I think.
Yeah,
because the other one's going to cost a lot more to get it up to the level of business that you want today. So that awareness is what kind of led me down this path of like just trying to become completely competent in all areas of business. And competent doesn't mean I have to be the expert. It means I have to have a certain level of understanding so that I can gauge and identify hurdles. I can objectively evaluate my company. A lot of times when I look at businesses, there's blind spots that are hurting their growth. They're like limiting them from getting to that next step. And if you could just expose those blind spots, you might be able to double your business in 3 years. And it could all come from just like being an objective and not trying to be defensive. Sometimes it can be ego, right? Like our businesses can very, very quickly become our self-identity.
I think for a lot of small businesses it is. And that's an issue because it's an emotional, you're making a lot of emotional decisions rather than business decisions.
Correct. And so if you identify a blind spot, that means you're also admitting that you're doing something wrong, which is hard to do. But if you can separate your sense of self-worth from the current state of your business and look at it as an asset and how do you improve the value of the asset, then like you're going to be in a much better spot, make better decisions.
You had this realization when you went back to work for your dad's business?
It was throughout that time. So I worked at my dad's business from 2014 to 2018, and we launched H+O in 2016. So this was all kind of in the same breath. And I'll share, if I could summarize that conversation we just had, there's 8 core functions in a business: planning, leadership, sales, marketing, people, operations, finance, and legal. In a healthy organization, one that's going to continue to grow and increase enterprise value, is balance in all 8 of those areas. What most private businesses are at any given time is they're strong in 2 or 3 of those areas. So you might be really strong you might have some leadership qualities. You might have really good operations and a technical skill to get some work done. But if you're deficient in sales, marketing, and legal, like you're going to have risk in your company that you may or may not see. And so if you can create balance in those, that's what's like, think of the company that, let's just say they're operating at 2 million. We hit a hot market, they climb up to 4 million and then immediately crash back down to 2 million and are like, oh man, life was easier at 2 million. I couldn't think about being a $4 million company again. That's because like your organizational balance is that of a $2 million company. Yeah. And there's a blind spot that's preventing you from being comfortable. Like there's companies out there that are $100 billion company that think life was easier at 50 billion. right? Like difficulty and stress level of business is relative to the leader and the organizational balance.
So essentially, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that you developed or at least began the process of developing the business and the business that you have with your dad and the new business based on what the valuation of a potential business may look like, and kind of dissecting that, like what is going to make this business the most valuable to somebody essentially who would want to buy the business, and that you started applying those principles to your own business.
It's a good way to put it. And I would say a business worth selling is a business worth owning.
Yeah.
So the fact of whether or not I sell it is irrelevant. I still want to increase organizational balance in infinity. I always want to improve.
But that's where you started digging into things and realizing what it's going to take to make a successful business is essentially in line with a business that were worthy of somebody else buying it.
Correct. And if I tie this conversation together with our future, where I look at, it's a pretty fragmented industry. Like there's no super huge structural engineering firm that's taking over the world, right? There's like there's a lot of structural engineering firms across the country, all relatively small in the scheme of business, which means there's opportunity to grow and buy other firms. So when I think of operating our firm, part of our 5-year growth, or like our vision of the future, is we're going to grow across the country and launch in other cities. And part of that growth strategy is going to be buying other businesses. But it's not just going to be Jeremiah and I that understand why. It's going to be our entire team, because we're trying to teach our entire team and expose them to the entire business, essentially giving them an MBA just by working with us, with our company as the case study. H+O is the case study. Open book financial management. They know the cost, they know the revenue, they know the profit. Everybody's tied into organizational performance, and that's how we get compensated. But when we go to start acquiring other businesses, not only is our team's going to completely understand why we're buying it and the financial incentive and the organizational value growth that we're going to be able to achieve if we do so successfully. Because acquiring business and integrating another company into yours is not easy. So we think we're putting ourselves in a very good position to do so successfully. And when we look at that other firm who likely has none of this, people are resistant to change, right? Engineers in particular, very resistant to change. We're thoughtful. We're creatures of habit. We eat the same thing at the restaurants we go to. So
damn, I should have been an engineer.
And I talk about, if I talk about, hey, we're going to have an iterative process, right? We're going to get to know the company before they're officially joining H+O. But if we go to that team and they say, this is how we do it, but this is how you do it, and we want to do it our way, we're going to show them their financials. We're going to show them our financials. We're going to show them our entire operational model. We're going to show them theirs, and they're going to see that we're outperforming them and that their compensation is going to increase based on our performance if we can get them up to that level. And we're going to be able to tie in the entire like organizational value growth into their compensation plan. So we're providing career upside for people beyond designing buildings, because now we're engineers, but we're integrating other companies. So we're part of we're acquiring businesses, which can be a very lucrative thing if done well.
Is part of that to help retain employees and create an environment where people want to stick around, right? Because if you have this business that's full transparency and you're going to teach everyone everything within the construction world, there's a massive stigma that, hey, you have to keep a lot of this close to the hip because somebody's going to go and start their own business. And I would assume that that's probably a similar mindset within the industry that you are in as well. So it is a lot of the other things that you're looking to do to be able to retain employees and not have them leave and go elsewhere.
There's definitely a retention tool, but like, I don't think any one of our employees is going to be happy working for another firm that doesn't work similar or isn't open book financial management. Like that is a huge retention tool.
Yeah.
Because you're looking under the hood. And when people are now all of a sudden unwilling to show you under the hood, that means they're hiding something, right? Yeah, they must be. So then you're going to start to fill in the blanks.
Let me stop you there for a minute, because I feel like a lot of people, especially employees of companies that are listening to this, immediately went to their boss. Like, he doesn't show me his financials. What's he hiding? Walk through a little bit is in much detail as you can. Like, what is that? How are you sharing these financials? Is it, are you sending out a P&L to the entire team via email, or do you guys get together once a week? Like, how are you sharing it, and to what level? Because, well, let me answer. I'll let you answer that first.
We have a Monday morning meeting, which I think most companies do, right? Like where you set off for like the week, you review last week, you set off for this week, you talk about high level stuff.
And that's in person or virtually?
We have, let's say we're a hybrid office. So we have some people that are full-time remote, some people that are in the office together. So we do it on Teams, even though some of us might be in the same room.
Got it.
It is virtually.
Yeah.
But our team, as a whole, no one is excluded, reports our P&L to Jeremiah and I every single Monday. So they forecast the P&L for the month, and then we see where we are month to date.
Who's they?
The entire company. So the PMs are generally the ones that are reporting on the amount of revenue they're going to be billing that month. And then our office manager is showing the expenses, and then we look at how that whole P&L kind of falls suit.
So say you have 4 PMs and they're all running 4 projects. When PM number 1 comes to you, they're going to say, here's the P&L for project 1, 2, 3, 4. And, this is how we're performing on my 4 and the subsequent PMs. So they're basically showing a job cost P&L. Is that right?
Job cost, I would say a job billing, not necessarily job cost, right? The costs don't go into the revenue. So they're just showing what they're billing for that project in that month.
Got it. So it's strictly PMs are showing, hey, this is the amount of revenue that we will be able to bill based on the work
that I'm going to do over the next month or manage over the next month.
Yeah. And then your office manager is saying, all of that's great. Say it's whatever, $1 million. And the office manager is putting together essentially, here's all the expenses that I'm projecting for the month. And then you're seeing from a total, and let's talk about the expenses for a minute. Is that a lump sum, or is it, hey, I get $17 in, postage and stamps and
so we lump burdened labor into one line. So we're not showing PM 1, 2, 3, 4 each make X, Y, and Z. Like we're not necessarily just like putting everyone's salary on highlight in the meeting. We have one lump sum for all compensation in there. And then below that, all of our expenses are itemized, right? Our software, our marketing, our rent, all that stuff is itemized out.
So from a personal perspective, salaries are just lumped in. It's, hey, $500,000 in salaries across the company. That way, I wanted to make sure that we cover that, because I feel like when you hear open book, there's that's usually where the resistance is. Where it's like, even, internally on my team, like I sit down with my CFO and we're talking about having more of an open book structure, and we're kind of communicating like, all right, how much do we want to show? And it's generally around the compensation of each employee, because some employee, as we know, everyone has their own perceived value, and like we have to make business decisions as to what they're paid, right? And then, the other one I always dance around, which is probably no surprise, is what I spend in marketing. And they're like, do you want to break that down? And I'm like, I don't know. And it was funny because I in my Builder 20 group, I got an email when they do the financials every spring, and I got an email saying, hey Nick, can you explain your marketing costs, because you are multiple times what everyone else is spending right now. And
doesn't surprise me.
I was like, sure, like, what do you want to know? I'm like, I'm investing to be, a movie star, I suppose. I don't know.
I love it.
But I think that's important to note. Like the open book, that what that does is it creates accountability for these PMs. And then it also, like you said, they get to see, wow, if I'm producing $1 million worth of work this month, and, PM number 2's doing 1.2, like maybe there's a little competition there.
There's 2 nuances to that. One is a PM doesn't necessarily get to control what work they get. So it was really important to us to make this a team wide. So when they report on profits, so at the bottom of our P&L, we have a very transparent bonus program where people make up to, depending on your role, but let's say the PMs make 20% of their salary as a bonus, they up to. So we have a strike price on minimum profit that we have to make as a company for them to make a bonus. And then there's a climbing ladder where they can earn up to 20%. And they report on that every single Monday. It's a part of our P&L to show what level bonus plan we are, so they know where we stand. Where we learn this, go ahead.
Break that down a little bit. So you're saying you have a strike price, call it 10% is what you're targeting for profit. Anything over that goes into a pool for bonus?
Correct. So there becomes a bonus pool where the company gets 50% of the profit and the team gets 50% of the profit.
All right. So for
that strike price, let's say strike price is 10, your goal is 20. So you have 10 levels of bonus increment. So at 11%, you're level 1, at 12%, you're level 2. So for the PM where their bonus is 20%, max bonus at 20%, at level 1, they get 2% of their salary as a bonus. At level 5, they'll get 10% of their salary as a bonus. And if we hit level 10 bonus, which is 20%, they get 20% of their salary as a bonus.
And you're looking at that per PM strike price? Or
that is just like across the board, like entry level is design engineer. They're getting 10% of their salary as a bonus. They have less ability to like drive the bottom line than a PM, but once you're at a PM, you're like the main driver of the bottom line. So you're compensated at 20%.
I guess my question is, if you have 4 PMs and 2 of them are, hitting, 11%, but the other 2 are hitting 20, it's company wide. Yeah. So if you have
we want to incentivize people to work together, right? So if someone's really good at this and you're really good at that, and we're hurting this month and we're both overwhelmed, like maybe we should be supporting each other in these ways. Or because what you don't want to do is have people fighting to just work on the easiest, most profitable jobs with the best clients and the healthiest fees. Like you don't want your best person to run from, maybe you take a loss leader where you're not making your profit margins, you're breaking even, but it's a marquee job for an important client that could be a massive 20-year partner. You don't want them like to feel bad about that project. Like that is arguably more critical than the few bucks you make that year, right?
And I think that, for those listening, like, the mindset that, well, if you have underperformers and they're not bringing anything to the table, they're getting to reap the benefits of the guys that are performing at a really high level. I think the argument there is, well, if they're constantly underperforming,
why are they on your team?
Yeah, why are they on the team? Are they in the wrong seat, or is it the wrong person?
I'm sitting here specifically thinking about this one asshole in college who, like, every group project would do nothing. Oh my God. It's the worst. He wouldn't be on the team.
Love that, Tyler. This is a really good like case study and things to think about, because it's a problem across most businesses. Good people are hard to find, right? Is that true? Or is your company hard to find? Are good people unable to find your company? Or are you not giving good people a reason to work for your company? So if you haven't thought about what's your value proposition to level 10 talent to come work at your company, then like, why would they come find you if you haven't articulated what you're doing for them in their career? Like, what are you doing why would they choose you over another company?
I think a big mistake, sorry to interrupt, is also that people just think that it's compensation, like that's going to solve all your issues.
Nope,
and it's not even close. It's not. There's so much more to it.
And when you are unable to attract talent to your company, you have to settle for the people that have already agreed to work there or that do apply, which means then you're compromising on the talent that you would like to hire. It's like, so sometimes your hiring or your people problems are really a recruiting and hiring problem because you're not generating enough attraction to your company.
Are all of these processes and business concepts things that you have integrated from day one of starting your business, or is this something that you've been implementing in recent years?
It's a great question. the business growth happens in stages, right? If we go back to organizational balance, in year one, you could argue this either way. Marketing wasn't necessarily like a core driver of our bottom line and our revenue and our growth in year one. Certainly would have helped, but it cost money and cash flow that we felt like was comfortable for us at the time, right? Like we wanted to make sure we were getting work, we could do outbound. We work in an industry where I could write down our top 50 clients like on a list, like off the top of my head, right? So you can just go straight to them. Cold calling is hard in this business too, but so there's parts of the business that have to develop depending on what stage you're at. So if I were to reflect now, we were talking, I just launched a podcast, Design Development, in November. And that is part of a marketing strategy that's going to fuel our next 5-year growth. Because what we're doing to date isn't going to allow us to achieve the company we want to be in 5 years. We picture in 5 years, we'll probably grow to about 80 people. We're at 20 now. So we'll grow from like 20 to 80 over the next 5 years organically. And we'll likely buy our first firm in that time period. But we're not going to attract firms to buy. And we're not going to be able to attract that many high level talent. We're super ruthless on the level talent we buy. Like I would put our 20 people up against any 20-person engineering team from like an experience perspective. Like we have a really, really, really solid team. And we want to continue to grow that because that'll be our lever in the long haul. And don't forget, we're transparent. We're trying to provide all this other opportunity to learn business for career upside because we are going to grow nationally. We are going to buy companies. We are launching in other cities. We launched in Denver recently. Like these are all opportunities for us to like, we don't think we're doing a good enough job of screaming this from the rooftops because we think we should have a line of people that want to be a part of this type of company. And because that line's not big enough, we don't think we're doing a good enough job. Right. And so that podcast is part of building brand awareness so people know about H+O. And we're doing that through a goodwill strategy.
You said it was 2016 that you started the business?
Correct.
So 7 years. What was year two? Like you have 20 people now. Did it grow very quickly initially, or has it been consistent growth, or was it like it took 3 years and then we've kind of been growing since then? What's that growth pattern look like for your team?
Let's say we grew like at about 100% a year, like from a revenue perspective for the first few years. And then over the last couple of years, we're growing at about 50% a year.
So you had a substantial growth, and then it's been more controlled growth since then.
Let's say the growth rate changes as you scale, right? Like 1 million to 2 million is 100% growth. 2 million to 3 million is the same amount of growth, but it's a lower percentage, right? 50% growth. So that number becomes harder to maintain. Like we're growing, our top line revenue is growing greater year over year, but it's less of a percentage.
Sure.
So I would say we've been pretty consistent. Like again, we were strategic. So if I talk through the challenge of launching your own engineering business, we were mid-level executors at a larger firm doing high-rise work. So we didn't really have the direct executive level, owner level relationships in that market. So while we could have stepped out and designed a $500 million tower with just the two of us, no one investing in a $500 million tower was going to say, hey, Rens and Jeremiah, I'm glad you launched a company. Here you go. So we had to start on like the small stuff in the market, the small commercial buildings, the 3 families, the single family flip, or like a rehab, a flip. And we quickly got into podiums, 30, 40, 50, 60 units. And then that compounded into 100, 200, 300 units. So the beginning years was working through the smaller and mid-market to get to large scale development. And the strategic thing we did to not just try to scale beyond belief. Remember that conversation about getting the right work, not every job? Mm-hmm. As we moved up market, we managed our price point relative to the rate in which we were able to hire the right talent. A big issue in business, I think, is when people just continue to say yes to work and then they have to compromise on the talent they hire because they need bodies to do the work. And then you're creating a bunch of operational and management debt in that process because you're going to have to go back and fix those things because you didn't grow them uniformly. Whereas if you can't hire, if you don't have a pipeline of people, and this is why you need to think about like how many people and what positions do I need to hire in the next year to reach my goals, then if you're not hitting those stages or you don't have the pipeline of people, you have to think about like, all right, now what jobs are the most strategic and help us get to that 5-year vision? All right, we need to move our price point up. So we start pricing out the bottom of our market and only serve the clients that really align with our value proposition. So we were constantly pushing away the bottom part of our client list, or I should say project list, and then focusing on the top part, kind of like the 80-20 rule.
So are you there at that 80-20 mark right now? Do you feel as though the projects that you want to be doing, that you're in that market?
We have a good portion of our book are in that market. So we kind of have let's say our strike price is, the current price we look at is like projects that are over like $100,000 design fees versus under $100,000 design fees. And most of our majority of our revenue is above that mark at this point.
And are those fees due to complexity or size of project or quality of project?
Those are all factors. So when we look at pricing a building, it's market type, structure type, its complexity, and its size, right? So we're looking at all those. And like there's different, high rise might come at a better value proposition than a mid rise podium, which is more commoditized. There's a lot more players that can do a wood podium building versus a 30-story high rise. So price points can be different given the market and the product type, but those are all things that go into those.
So how do you manage scaling if that's your market right now? I think that the struggle for most people is when they scale, to be able to maintain the level of execution and the hands-on approach to every project. It seems as the more you grow, the more difficult it is to get the level of service that a smaller company can offer. So what are you putting in place to be able to combat that moving forward?
One of the things we recognized that we saw missing from a lot of firms, and this was actually the steel industry that kind of set this light bulb off. The steel world has an AISC certification for a fabricator erector. And what that really means is you have a written down, documented process of how every single thing happens in your business, from how you estimate, to how you do shop drawings, to how you put shop drawings down to the shop, fabricate, load, deliver, offload, erect, right? It's a pain to figure out the first time. It's a ton. But what that does, that's quality management. A lot of people they call it quality control, and that's someone at the top of the organization, a leader that looks at the design midway and maybe at the end. They just answer a few questions and look to make sure nothing's out of line. Proper quality management means that somebody followed a process and executed to the quality standards, so that when somebody does come back and look, which is quality control, they're making sure the person went through the process and designed to the quality standards. That wasn't really defined. There's no like uniform design process in engineering or architecture. And we literally started building that from day one. We built that for 8 months before we even had a website, because we knew we wanted to scale. So our thought was, how are we going to onboard and get people efficient and in line with how we want to do things? We need to build a process. We need to have training. We need to get everybody on the same page. The mission, vision, values, that helps too, right? So when you have that type of clarity, we're trying to do the right things to attract the level 10 talent. We're trying to share in the upside and create opportunity for everybody. And so if we can hire well, get top talent, have the process, have the standards, have the culture of growth and like constant improvement, objective, like there's no mistakes. There's only opportunities to learn, as well as long as we're willing to admit them and then fix them moving forward for the whole company. When you can do that, you can scale, and you have people on your company that are capable of jumping to that next level or working on that bigger project or managing people, and you can start to promote from within. I think that's the most important part. As a leader, I learned quickly micromanaging is a hard thing to drop, right? Because you care about the quality. Nick, I'm sure this is hard for you as like an expert craftsman and caring so much about the precision of the product. But you can't serve people if you try to do everything yourself. And part of going back to mergers and acquisition and thinking about enterprise value, if I kept trying to do everything myself or micromanage people into making the big decisions and not letting them make decisions, then I was just doing a disservice to everybody by like basically shoving the enterprise value into the ground and like capping the growth potential of the company. I needed to step away.
Mhm.
And the mindset there was me stepping away is not micromanaging. It's letting people make mistakes and grow and learn so that we can identify the flaws in our business so that we can raise enterprise value.
So with that, like one of the biggest things that comes up, and when I chat with people is like, well, how do I, I don't want them to make the mistakes. Like, how do I get people to how do I prevent people from making mistakes? And there's a number of ways. You just touched on SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures, putting these things into place. Like, hey, these are the parameters in which you work. You don't want to make them so strict that they have blinders on and they only are going in one direction. You want it loosely defined where it's like it sets the parameters as to what needs to be accomplished, but it allows them to make mistakes. And and oftentimes I say, listen, you're going to want to prevent them from making that mistake that you made because you made it, it cost you money, and you don't want, and you should be able to communicate that to him to prevent them from making it. But you learned a valuable lesson, so much so that you're so worried about it every time you go to do that thing. You can communicate like, hey, this happened to me before, but there is a part of you that has to accept, if you're looking to grow, that you have to accept the fact that these people are going to make the same mistakes you made, and as they do, the intent is for them to learn from that, and the intent is for the whole group to learn from that. I struggled with it too. I continue to struggle with the fact that I would love to micromanage. I'm constantly in my own head when I'm in a meeting, telling myself to shut up, because I'm like, I could just tell him right now to do this thing, and
That's hard.
we can stop having a conversation about it, and we can just move forward. And and a big thing, in talking with like guys like Jocko, it's like I had to force myself to shut up, ask earnest questions, and see if they could get to the answer without me. And ultimately, if they didn't, okay, I'm going to chime in and give them a little coaxing into the direction that they should be going. But ultimately, when they get to that answer on their own, that's rewarding. When I turn and say that's a great idea, like that feels good to them and to me, because I'm not the one that ended up having to outline it. And that's
100%.
the part about stepping back and being in a role where you're not micromanaging, you're not you're not being the director of everything that has to go on, because and I've seen it too, I've watched it fail on me, where it's like, at one point my team was like, hey Nick, can you show up more than once a week on site, because we have so many questions as to how you want things done. And I was like, shit, man, like now they're required to have me there in order for them to make progress.
Yep.
And that, I mean, talk about stunting growth. It's like you got to empower these people to make decisions. And I've said it 1,000 times. It's like, of course the best decision is the right one, but the second best is the wrong one, and the worst is no decision. And I say that constantly. My
I
team
like that.
my team rolls their eyes. They're like, yeah, I know, like the worst decision is no decision. I'm like, but let's talk about that and let's like dissect that a little bit. Obviously, the right decision's, the best, right? Or the best decision is the right one because that's the right decision.
Yep.
But when you make the wrong decision, and maybe it's, I don't know, like maybe it's, hey, I decided to miter this baseboard instead of cope it, and I think that miter is wrong. The reality of that situation is that it's, okay, it's wrong, but it at that point, there's two things that can happen. We either rip it out and do it again, or it's wrong, but it's not, so wrong that it has to be redone. We're still accomplishing it. It just, it's the lesser way to do it, or the more expensive way to do it, or it took more time, like whatever it is. The reality of my point is the reality of the wrong decision. Still, there's probably a 50-50 shot that you could live with it, based on what your core, like what your values are, and what is the most important. But when you make no decision, you have a 50-50 shot of getting it right, and then you have a 50-50 shot of being able to accept the fact that it was wrong, but it still works. When you make no decision, you make no progress.
Couldn't
And
agree more.
And that's and that is exactly like why it's so important that when you think about growth, when you think about building a business, when you're thinking about empowering a team, the only way to do that is to allow them to make progress without like direct direction.
Perfect. If I could give actionable advice to people that are trying to stop micromanage, a couple ways to do that. One is you have to be very clear on your value proposition and your intent with your client. So you want to build strong relationships at the top. Let's say I think at scale. So I like to work with companies where we're doing repeat work and have several projects at a time with them. So building a strong relationship and an understanding of intent at the top is critical because you want that relationship to be so strong. If there's a mistake between Nick and I on a project, we're not out there like swinging a hammer saying like, can't believe Nick did this or can't believe Rens did that. It's, hey, I know Nick's intent. I know Rens's intent. Like, here's a mistake that happened. How do we fix it? How do we move forward? Right? How to do that at scale. Relationships allow you to do that when you're small. How to do that at scale comes back to the brand. If you can build brand awareness to your intent and you're crystal clear on the intent and the value proposition and the values of your firm, you're going to have evangelists out there. You're going to have people that advocate and know what you're trying to do. And they're going to come to you with like a, hey, this happened. Like, just wanted to give you the heads up so you know that you can fix it because I know this isn't what you want. And because the biggest thing in micromanaging is I don't want to lose a client over a mistake.
Right.
So you use the standard operating procedures, the process to hit all the big stuff so that you know the big stuff is getting done right. And the little things where the mistakes are minimized, if those happen, you rely on your brand and your relationships and you fix them and you move forward. But it allows you to grow at a rate where you're able to create a much better experience at scale than saying small.
Do you, as far as what you're doing now, are you doing engineering work on a daily basis?
I am not, no.
No.
I personally haven't engineered on a daily basis since 2014 when I left that company.
So, I mean, I guess that's where my question's going. It's almost as if you went into engineering and now you're just like you're more on the business side of things. What does your business partner do? What's his role within the company?
Jeremiah is one of the most amazing engineers I've ever worked with. I always say he's the 0.01%. He is so much more than just like a high level, like incredible engineer. He is very strategic in how he's thinking. He's an objective thinker. He has a very good like social awareness and emotional IQ, emotional intelligence. He is like, if we kind of talk about roles like operations, he builds a lot of our training, our engineering process. He's kind of the overseer of that. Let's say we have a new marquee, we have a new high-rise system that we're working with an industry partner on that could really change the high-rise landscape. So he's doing all the R&D and vetting the new high-rise system. Right. So he's focused on the big level engineering. We might get a new marquee high rise where he would be involved heavily in the initial stages to kick that project off in the right direction, make sure it's the right system, the most efficient, how it's laid out and problem solve to make the pro forma work. And then he's like our ace in the hole. Like if for some reason we do get overwhelmed or tight against a deadline and someone needs to bail out, like he's as fast as it gets in engineering. So he's a good person to have on the bench when you need to call him.
So you met him at your old job?
Yeah, we met when I was working at that firm downtown.
And were you guys both under the idea that you wanted something else, that you wanted to go off and start your own thing? Like, how did that relationship go from where you were at that point to, hey, let's start a business together?
We were great friends at that time and always talked like strategically and big thinking, right? So those conversations always come up. I honestly, I would say business is almost my hobby at this point. So I was always talking about the future and how do we create more opportunity for ourselves. And once I left and went to the steel company and we were collaborating on the small side engineering work that we were getting, I was also sharing all the stuff that we were doing at the steel company and the opportunity and talking about the strengths of the company, but also the flaws of the company and how we were correcting, how we were growing. And it gave us the confidence that we were going to be able to do it in the engineering market. And he ended up leaving that company to come work with us at the steel company for a period of time to help manage. We had a high workload. He took on a management role for us. And during that time is the same time we were building the design process for H+O. So it allowed us to be in the same office building on the side while we were still helping run the steel company. I stayed on the steel company for a few years. We got too much work, hired our first employee. We actually hired 3 employees before I worked full time at H+O, which is kind of cool.
Sounds like Nick.
Sorry, Tyler, to interject. You grew that steel company. Did when you stepped into that role, didn't you grow that steel company pretty significantly?
We grew about 10x in 4 years.
Just the steel company.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
it was an awesome ride. It was a ton of fun. We learned a ton. My dad and I worked great together. It was a lot of fun. I feel fortunate that I get to work in businesses where I get to work with like the top industry expert. I had my dad in steel, and then I got Jeremiah here in engineering. So I'm a pretty lucky guy.
Now you're on the number 1 podcast in the construction.
Hell yeah.
There we go. Hell yeah.
So when you decided that you wanted to pursue engineering, was that just the path to take based on everything in your life to that point? Because it doesn't seem like engineering is your passion.
It's interesting. I really enjoy the engineering and construction world. Like, I still love the strategic side of like, does this development work? How do we build this building? The experience I've had in 1 building and 2 managing, I built an entire estimating process at the steel company. Like I was very much in the weeds of management, delivery, like firefighter, loading trucks when you'd have to. Like I did everything at the steel company. And then between that and the high-rise experience and then the business acumen exposures to like the buying and selling of businesses with M&A, it gave me a lot of, it gave me better insight into where I thought I was most valuable, right? Like I can still go back and engineer, but is my production that much better as an engineer than a really good project manager? In some respects, but like on the technical side, like I don't separate myself as much as someone like Jeremiah, but I separate myself when it comes to strategic thinking and business building.
Does it have anything to do with just what you want, or is it where you're basing this decision based on where your value is? And I guess the delineation there is it more important to put yourself in a role where you're most valuable or where you're happiest?
Happiest. If you can bridge the two, you win. And I feel fortunate that I want to say I have. Like I truly enjoy what I do. And like if I won the lottery or got some big offer, like I'm still going to be in the business of real estate development, design, and construction in one way or another. Like it's what I enjoy doing. On the last podcast I was on, they were like, what are your hobbies besides golf? I was like, golf and business and my family. Like that, this is what I enjoy doing.
So the scaling is because you enjoy business. And I like to try and figure out why people do things. And if you got into engineering because of your engineering background and your dad's business, and then you've kind of just not jump ship is what's coming to mind, but it's not necessarily in a bad way. But it looks like you're pursuing more of the business end of things and looking to scale. And I think to myself, why do people want to scale? Is it because they enjoy the thrill of the hunt? Is it because they want to build a business? Is it because it makes them happier? Is it because of money?
Such a good question.
Yeah. And what do you think drives you to want to scale a business? I mean, you could tell me money. If it's money, that's fine. I
wrote a post recently, and it resonates here. My biggest fear is not living up to my potential. I'm a very goal-driven person. I need something. I enjoy the pursuit, right? We were talking about like, oh, I got to clean 300 pounds in the next 3 months and ruin my back. Like, and then I'm on the pursuit of like rebuilding my health and I'm definitely goal-driven and pursuit-driven. Like that fills me. I definitely had a lifestyle. Part of what drove me to go to in my own business is I desired a certain lifestyle. There's a book Living Your Best Year Ever by Darren Hardy. And it's a really great reflection of everything in your life. And it's not just business or financial, it's friendships, it's mental health, it's physical health, it's family, spiritual. And you start to that, and he also wrote a book, The Compound Effect, and you start to look at like, what is it that you actually want in your life? And then you back into like, how much money, like, is my current career gonna, like, in the path I'm on in my current career, is that going to allow me to achieve my desired life? And at that time, the answer was no. I wasn't on a path that was going to allow me to live the life that I wanted to live. And once I got into business and then started learning more about business and developed the business acumen, I started to think about what was possible. Like, did I start on day one and think I'm going to grow a national company? I didn't. But as I developed business acumen and understood the importance of growth, like growing for growth's sake, I think is very dangerous. Growing for the right reasons, which is because you provide so much value and because to clients and because you provide so much opportunity for people that work there, both of those companies are going to demand, your clients are going to demand more of you, and people are going to learn about that great service and want to work with you. And if you're creating opportunity for people and you're pouring into them so that they're capable of seizing that opportunity, they're going to help grow and push the company to grow more. So in my mind, the only way to grow a really healthy business is to grow. And the second you stop growing is the second you start taking on other organizational flaws that really start to kind of hurt the company long term. Second part, I definitely desired financial security initially. And I felt like I achieved that. Like, that doesn't mean I can stop working tomorrow and like I'm set for life, but I have confidence in my lifetime financial security. And then it very quickly shifted to, well, then what is my purpose? And in that growth and creating, it's living up to your potential, right? Like that goes back to that fear. Like, I don't want to not live up to my potential. And I feel like we have the ability as leaders, Jeremiah and I, and the desire to grow. And a lot of that is creating opportunity and like changing the industry for the better.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I think that a lot of people overcomplicate what they do and what their lot is in life, and try and fit or manage their lifestyle where they don't realize that they have the opportunity to live the lifestyle that they want. And you saying, I'm going to determine what type of lifestyle I want, and then figure out what I need to do to support that. Most people don't break it down to such simple terms, and they overcomplicate that journey in their life. And I think that you look at what everyone else is doing, and some people have more, some people have less, and you're always comparing. And I think that if you just figured out what makes you happy and what you need in life to feel content, that it's as simple as, all right, now I can just reverse engineer this and figure out how I need to get there from where I am now. And it doesn't need to be, what you need, what Nick need, and what I need are three completely different things, and there's not a right or a wrong for any of us. And it's just interesting to hear in simple terms. I've said it a lot myself as well. It's like, I do what I do because it affords me a lifestyle that I want, and it's not this crazy lifestyle, and it's not necessarily financial freedom, but it's conducive to my personality and what makes me the best version of myself, and gives me the least amount of anxiety and stress, and that's just what works for me. That doesn't, like, what works for Nick would drive me up a fucking wall.
I was gonna say,
like,
I like a little anxiety.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But
You gotta sign up for that.
yeah, it's interesting to hear. But that being said, another question I have for you is, what what's the biggest risk that you feel taking the path that you're taking as far as scaling a business and growing? You said within 4 or 5 years you want to have 80 employees. Like, what's the thing keeping you up at night that's the biggest risk that could make this crash down?
I don't feel risk of crashing. I really don't. I feel very confident in the organization, the balance, like the health of the company. we would, if our business gets rattled, like there's a significant, something wrong is really happening.
You're not the only one getting
if,
impacted.
if I talk about what keeps me up at night or the things that I'm working on as a leader to try to achieve that 5-year vision, it's the brand, it's the brand building so that we can attract the talent and like clients aligned to hit that growth. And so the things that we've invested in are increased in marketing. A lot of my time we do the podcast, the production, it goes on YouTube, all the social media, all that stuff that comes with it. And I feel like we're just dipping the toes into that investment in the past, and it serves us well to date. So I'm always scared of investing money when I'm not confident on what the ROI is. We've generally, if we aren't confident in the ROI, we don't spend the money. So like if I had to be frank, like right now, even just talking about a website, we're creating demand with our current strategy to like generate more buzz and conversation, very effective locally. We got to consider how are we going to like advertise and spend money to push that more nationally into the markets we're interested in. And then two, if I'm creating demand, how are we capturing that demand? And if I look at our website objectively, it has a nice look to it. It doesn't exactly reflect who we are today, and it doesn't exactly hit our value proposition to each one of our potential clients, which is an architect or a real estate developer. And it's kind of resistant to them getting in touch. So to the three of us sending a DM to somebody that we feel a connection with on social media or on a podcast isn't a big deal. But to a lot of people, that is a big deal. Like being the first to come in and just say, hey, like I like this, this, and this. But so how am I creating an opportunity to make it completely painless for them to actually start their relationship with us today? Because our target clients might only be offering a job once, twice, 3 times a year. What's the chances they're on our website those 3 days, right? So creating the demand, but then creating a passive, painless way for them to get in touch. And I want to like pour into that strategy. And I just haven't figured out how to measure it or built the confidence in the return on that investment, or the confidence that I just got to put money out there to learn. Nick or you guys might be the guys that can help me through that process, but that's the thing that I'm thinking about all day.
So what does failure look like to you in your existing situation?
Like, I don't like, if I even, let's say the number doesn't matter. Let's just say I spent 20 grand when I wasn't confident on the return. Like, that's a loss to me. I don't like that. Like, that was a bad strategic decision because I wasn't confident. I spent it and it didn't work. 40 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever the number is, like just the fact that I took a risk without understanding the return, like that to me is gambling, and that was a bad decision. But I feel like I got to figure that out because I want to make the appropriate effort in the right ways to get it done.
Do you have somebody who's helping manage all the business end of things, or is that all on you? As far as development and processes, like do you have a business coach, or is this all self-educated?
We're self-educated, and then kind of like through, like we have like our mentors that we might talk to periodically or go to in a certain conversation, and like peer stuff. Like Nick and I would get breakfast like once a month for a while. We got to get back on that train.
Yeah.
But like those conversations we've used to date, and I constantly, I question us on that. And like, I see the need for a board of, or the value in a board of advisors.
Mm-hmm.
To date, we've stayed ahead of our company to the point where we haven't done that yet. We've just used like kind of our circle of friends to get the guidance to help us make decisions. But that's coming, right? So elaborating on this, the growth to date as leaders, we've largely just looked at the next year, the next couple of years, and said like, here's where we got to go. Marketing, for instance, right? I don't know who to pay that can market for us better than us, or
Nick,
like I don't know who to pay or what the strategy is. So I need to figure this out. But the problem is if I have to learn and become the expert in every single hurdle we face, we very quickly become the bottleneck.
Yeah.
We've been able to do it to date, but we're at the point where we have to get better at evaluating and paying talent to learn faster, to grow faster.
Yeah, I mean it's the whole micromanaging thing. You're just doing it in a different
way.
aspect of your business.
And that to me is a fear of wasting money and resources when we don't actually know what the outcome is.
So
Because it's not
and
aligned.
and that's hard, like especially from a marketing perspective. It was only recently that I've been working with Slash since I started NS Builders, and they're my branding company. And recently we had this chat, Drew and I, and he's he was not pitching me, but we were talking about like what the vision of Slash was and like how NS Builders and us would continue to partner. And he dropped this term saying like brand guardianship,
Mm-hmm.
and I stopped and I was like, he's right. It's like I would go order T-shirts and I would put the logo on the T-shirt. As simple as that sounds. What's the
Mm-hmm.
big deal? I get the shirts. I'm like, they look like shit. He's like, why didn't you send them to me? I'm like, it was a T-shirt. He goes, I want it to be a certain size, a certain look. He's like, don't letter a truck. Don't do a T-shirt. Don't make a business card. Don't print a folder. Don't even send a document to a client without me looking at it. And ever since we've done that, like now, mind you, it's like, well, what's the ROI on that? There, like, I can't measure that,
No.
but I've talked about it before. Our handbook, a couple $1,000 with a lawyer. Last thing I want to do is spend more money trying to get this handbook, like any more than like refined anymore. But I
Mm-hmm.
said, no, you know what, Drew? Like, take this handbook and let's make it look like our brand. And he did. And then I was like, shit, can you do that to the health and safety manual? Did that. Then I'm like, okay, can you do it to the home care man? Like, so now every piece of document that gets submitted, even just internally to the team, isn't this just like generic Word document that no one's going to read? Now it's a sexy book. I have one right
Mm-hmm.
here, right?
Look at that.
A sexy book that like is kind of cool to flip through. And so now I'm like, all right, the ROI, like I can't maybe measure that, but now I understand, the guardianship that we're doing around brand. So like I shared those similar thoughts early on, but now, and I've always been pretty risky and like open to that.
Risque. That's what the
Risk,
tequila does.
Risque.
but the reality is like I do have this, and maybe it's this naive thought, but I do have this mindset that the only reason it would fail, and the only reason anything fails, is that you give up.
Yeah.
And I know that is like completely simplifying it, and there's probably 15 people saying, no, Nick, like people fail even though they try. Sure. But you try, and you fail. The only time it's a failure is when you stop trying.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that failure is wrong or it's bad or anything. Like, oftentimes it could be very good.
Mm-hmm.
But that true, like if you do simplify it, it's failure when you stop trying.
I agree.
And for me, it's like when I decide to do something that people don't agree with, or like that's risky, or like our development side, people are like, we're design. You've seen the design.
Mm-hmm.
It's not typical. It's not a spec
It
house,
is not
right?
typical.
And
Custom.
and people are like, dude, like you got to be simpler. Like you got to appeal to the masses. Like this isn't gonna be. And I'm like, you know what, man? Maybe I'm wrong, but right now, I don't think I'm wrong. And I'm going to try, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I prove that this is right. But if I do fail and I am wrong, that's okay. At least I know. At least
Mm-hmm.
I went through that process. And yes, there are, like, trust me, there's parameters, there's bumpers up on this bowling lane where it's
Sure.
like the failure, like the rate of failure isn't going, like, in theory shouldn't be massive. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't sell it for the premium to which I hope to sell it, but maybe, but we sell it and we break even, and it's like, okay, that was a lesson. That was a
Yep.
15-month $0 gain, but whatever. Like the point is, I'm not going to go into it giving up because 15 people told me no. It was the same thing, when we try to finance the thing. It's like a lot of people were like, no, it's too risky. You got to build a colonial, like, or like, hey, it's too risky. There's wetlands on the site, or it's a steep lot. It's like, no, all these things all of these are the reasons why I want to build the house here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the wetlands, but like the water is nice.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. The custom, the brand identity that it brings to the market, like it is truly pioneering. I guess the thing I wrestle with is regardless of the risk profile, you kind of know what your upside and your downside is. So you can make a decision. I don't know, like in my mind, the if I just start communicate what I'm thinking, I don't know if I spend 50 grand with a marketing company, do I learn enough to move forward, or do I feel like I just wasted 50 grand and I found something finding something that doesn't work, I guess, is learning. And then I go to spend another 50 with somebody else. Like, where do I go? That's the thing I'm wrestling with. Like, if I kind of understood, I could make a decision. Like, I'm willing to risk. Risk is necessary.
I mean, do you think that looking at business from more of a quantifiable perspective rather than a conceptual perspective would help? Like bringing in a business professional that can really break down numbers and look at numbers rather than developing a lot of conceptual business principles. Like that to me is valuable from a business perspective. I think that there's a ton of stuff that you can learn self-educating yourself, whether it's application wise with what I do. It's so hard to understand like scaling a business and the numbers and the ROI of those numbers if you don't have that business type of background. Like are you fairly versed in that aspect of business just from doing this, or do you think that that's something that you could reach out to and bring somebody in to help with?
Sorry, could you ask that question one more time? Is it like the numbers side of the?
Yeah, so like essentially, obviously, looking through what you've developed in your business principles and the conceptual aspect of business, it's all there. But I think that either a formal education or somebody who is well versed in the quantifiable aspects of business, determining ROI, all of that stuff, is that where you feel you could reach out and bring somebody on board, or is that something that you feel confident in handling yourself?
Tough question for me to answer directly, so I'll share what I'm thinking. A lot of times when I talk to marketing professionals, we're professional services, but the ticket items that like our contract values, like we said, are generally can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So our clients aren't typically searching; they're not going to Google search for an engineer to hire for that building. It's generally from a circle. So if you look at the industry as a whole, it's largely account-based marketing, or they call it business development, which are essentially salespeople that are just out there in the market connecting all the people and all the deals, and they know everything that's going on. The thing we're trying to do differently is figure out this marketing model, get our brand messaging right, get the offer right, get the positioning right, so that we can scale nationally, so that like we can not only just service the greater Boston market, so that we can be successful in Denver and Raleigh and wherever those cities that we choose to be. And a lot of the marketing professionals that I find are professional services, but much smaller ticket items, or like product-based marketing. The product-based marketing space to me, like or SaaS marketing, those numbers make way more sense to me, because they're generally like it's a lower hurdle to the purchase. Like we have generally a longer sales cycle than any of those other companies. And if you're going to build a marketing company, you're not going to build a marketing company that specializes in high ticket item professional services. You're going to build a marketing company that appeals to SaaS or product marketing, online sales, right?
So
Lower ticket stuff,
just for everyone listening, SaaS is software as a service. And I'm only saying that because I learned that term last week.
Oh, love that.
Yeah. So I'm just
But isn't the marketing for your business and for what you're looking to do so much more than attracting the right clients? Like you're trying to
100%.
build this business that's attracting the right hire, and building this brand that the number and the investment may not directly correlate or be attributable to your client. But I think that there's a much bigger picture there when
Correct.
looking to build a national brand, that crossover, that delineation it's not from A to B. it's there is a little bit of gray area there, because I think that it's the same thing as what Nick has done. All of his marketing is not just to get the client. That's to get the people to come work for him and to build and establish all of those relationships. It can't just be a pass through directly to his customer.
Well said. Yeah, you're exactly right. We're not just marketing to the client, we're marketing to everybody.
Yeah, so it's tough to figure out where that number lies, because it's not necessarily just like, hey, this is just to get more work.
It's not necessarily a number. Right? Yeah, like attracting people, I think, might be our most important thing. But
Yeah.
that brand awareness and like the spend, like that's why we went with the podcast. It's my time, and then we're able to produce a lot of content and brand awareness for like a relatively moderate investment. And we're also building relationships and providing value, like goodwill, to the guests who could be target clients, high influencers of our target clients, and then also just general, like inviting people in the industry that don't get to have the conversations that we have. Right? You're inviting them into those conversations so they can learn and hopefully see insight and ways to grow their career.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And that's where I guess even my question from earlier, where it's like, does it make sense to bring in people with a more specific business background to look at numbers and figure out the inner workings of the business to see where money is best invested, especially when you start getting to scaling a business, and it's like you end up just micromanaging all aspects of your business and controlling everything, and you're going to be the bottleneck of it.
Correct. I used to think like micromanaging or working on the business was getting to just marketing and sales. And now we're at this stage of business, and I'm mostly marketing and sales, and I'm like the bottleneck of the future business, and I'm still in business. This isn't working on the business.
No, for sure. That's tough. And I mean, I guess that comes with growth, or the growth that you're looking to gain, because if you were content with just staying where you are, it's probably within your capacity to handle this. But if you're looking to grow and you're continuing to grow, it's at the point where it's like, I got to bring somebody else in to help with the business development, because it's just too much for me right now.
Which comes back to like, what do I spend? Do I do outsource? Do I do inbound?
Yeah.
I don't want to hire somebody in marketing under me. I want to hire somebody to lead the marketing effort, right? So is that a fractional role? Is that an internal role? Those are, and I guess if I were fear, I don't know is the right word. I'm just hesitant because I don't know the right answer.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have to do something.
I got to pay to play, I think.
Yeah. You're going to have to do something and either fuck it up, or make it work in order to get your answer. It's like what you and Nick were talking about earlier. Right now, you're making a no decision.
Yeah. No decision. Well, I started a podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm moving, but I still need to make another decision. Is my video working on your end?
No.
Brutal.
You froze up. Looks like it looks like you're biting your lip.
Yeah,
it's a frozen.
Let me see if I can stop cam and then restart it.
No, you're still frozen. It's been what'd you say is the name of your podcast again?
Design Development.
And you guys have released episodes already, or is this something that you're putting together and then you're going to launch?
Episode 18 goes tomorrow. We release every single Wednesday.
Cool.
And it's your hub to learn from top performers in real estate development, design, and construction. That's the premise.
And you're on all of the standard podcast platforms?
Yep. Spotify, Apple, I think iHeartRadio or something. And then YouTube. We're building that.
How long are your episodes typically?
45 to an hour.
Nice. How has it been? Have you been enjoying it?
Yeah, I really do. Like, honestly, these are conversations I enjoy and try to have with clients anyway. So it creates, again, an opportunity to help share their story with the masses to hopefully provide value for them and their companies, and also share their perspective so people can see correlations in the industry and growth path, right? So
are you the only host, or is your business partner a host as well?
I'm the only host.
Cool.
You don't
want like a straight up engineer hosting a podcast.
No, but Jeremiah should be on.
So Jeremiah wants not. I always check in
wants
with him.
nothing.
Like, you want me to show your face? You want to be on? He wants nothing to do with it. I will interview him. We've been debating like how many subscribers do we need till we release that, or do we just go for it and do it sooner than later?
You could do a couple of them. I think that early on we release some podcasts and then circle back and re-interview once you get your legs underneath yourself and you realize that you didn't know what the hell you were doing for a long time. I'll probably be
Right.
saying the same thing in a couple years from now.
This
But
can
yeah, I mean the whole podcast, there you are.
I switched cameras, although this one's not as nice, but
The podcast game has been interesting. Obviously, it's been a long journey. Um, I think that the biggest advice I have for anyone is to devote the necessary time to it. It's not just as easy as hopping on and having a conversation and filming it and recording it. Obviously, you can do that, but it's like you said before, to maximize your potential and give it your all and be the best person that you can be. It's preparing for those interviews and researching the person and just educating yourself and then steering that conversation, which you don't always have an opportunity to do. But I think that you owe it to yourself, your guest, and your listeners to be able to do that. So that would be my words of advice, would be to put some time aside week in and week out to prep yourself on them and do the best job that you can and create some sort of narrative for your interviews. I listened to a book about interviewing people. I sent it to Nick at some point, and it's like these people who do this research every single person that they interview and spend countless hours
yeah,
basically trying to figure out how to navigate that conversation. And this is what they went to school for. This is what they've done their entire lives. And to think that we're going to show up on a podcast and just wing it and it's going to be good is foolish and naive of us.
wise advice. It's definitely a learned skill.
Yeah.
Being conversational isn't in itself is not enough. If like I went to record like our generic intro and I was like, I'm gonna be a crystal clear speaker and very punctual and all that. And then I listened to it. It was like the slowest thing ever read out loud by a human being. I was like, how bad did I start off?
Yeah, that's where we had to ban Nick's tequila. It got bad.
To the tequila mocktail with all the chemicals.
Yeah. Yeah, but just keep after it. It does get easier, but like I said, it's just like anything in life. If you go into it completely unprepared, you may be able to get through it, but it's not going to be the best that you're not doing the best that you can. If you go into something prepared and confident, even if you're making shit up, it winds up so much better.
Yeah, for sure. It's good advice. You have to check mine out. I'll take your rating.
Yeah, for sure. I'll check it out.
Tyler will give it to you straight.
Yeah, we could post that in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Try and give you a plug. Hopefully get some people on there to give it a listen.
There we go.
Rens, I appreciate you being on, man. And I know we definitely need to get breakfast back on our schedule.
For sure.
When, I don't know, but we definitely should, because like you said, I think one of the valuable things that we can do, all of us, anyone listening, is networking with peers that share similar mindsets and being able to bounce ideas off each other. I know I've certainly learned a lot from you, and hopefully you've learned a thing or two from me, and
absolutely
appreciate your partnership as our go-to structural engineer.
Appreciate you, Nick, and thank you, Tyler. It's been a great time here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And we'll get all the information to Doug so we can put it in the show notes for your podcast. But I appreciate being on, making the time.
Awesome, guys. Have a great day.
Yeah, good luck with everything.